So eating more
Um,
sugar decreases your full signal, and then you want to eat more.
mm.
So, in other words, sugar doesn't ever curb your hunger, it actually increases your hunger.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am very intrigued with the world around us right now because I think personally that Vladimir Putin has lost his touch because he was insulted back in May by the leader of Wagner. Or is it with a W or a V? Or I'm not sure. Let's not get into semantics, shall we? And just recently, it was like reading a book. I'm like, man, usually it just happens like in a week, but it took him a few months. That means he's getting a little rusty. I can't get that guy's name, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and it is a thing for me. Like Russian names are hard. Like Vladimir, you get it. Georgi, you get it. Or even Mika, you get it. But man, this is Yevgeny Prigozhin, and it's just so obvious, but no one's admitting it, right? Like everyone's like, oh, he was hit, it was taken out, but everyone's like, no, that's the world we live in, right? There's no one truth. There's no black or white when it comes to the truth, especially. I mean, it's too black or white when it comes to other things like polarizing things. But when it comes to the truth, there are multiple truths and everyone can believe their own truth. And that's kind of messed up because it then leads to all sorts of shit. But I didn't want to, I mean, I did want to talk about that. That's why I did speak about it. But I'll tell you something, while you read this kind of stuff, which is heartbreaking, which is, anxiety provoking or whatever the thing is, which creates fear in you, there is some stuff which makes you smile every so often, right? I was reading this article today because I think this week as we speak, I think there's a G20 in New Delhi and a lot of the big countries coming. You know what G20, I'm not going to give you a breakdown of the G20, but a lot of preparation happening, a lot of things being shut down for security because, of course, you have these big twats coming in and they are the leaders of the free world or whatever you want to call it. And everyone has to basically shut up and step aside because they're taking decisions that will affect us all. And these are men typically, or maybe some women who, have a shitload of power over our lives. And yet we seem to be pushed aside. Anyway, I don't want to go down that slippery slope of commenting on politicians and political leaders. There are some good ones, many bad ones. I'll leave it at that. But the thing that interested me is that there is a monkey problem in Delhi. Now, these are, is it the rhesus monkey? And they are notorious for going and harassing people, passers by. They run across the road, they nick food from people, they trouble people. And now, of course, with the world leaders setting foot in the capital of the country, this cannot happen. It will mar the image of India when monkeys go and bother other monkeys. These are monkeys in suits. These are other monkeys which are not in suits. So you have to address this problem, right? Because you're having a G20, you can't have a monkey issue, man. You can't be aping the West, right? You can't have these problems where monkeys are going around disrupting policymakers at their most heightened sense of responsibility and dedication to the country and their people. It would be hilarious, though, right? Like they're going around a policy of climate change and climate action, and suddenly a monkey's like, fuck you, just like scratching his balls, showing his middle finger. That would be hilarious. But to avoid monkeys from intruding on the G20 and disrupting affairs and the conference and all the activities around it, what has the municipal department in Delhi done? Well, their proposal is to put cutouts of langur. Is it langur monkeys, which are the bigger, and they said it, black-faced monkeys. I didn't say it, they said it. To scare the other monkeys, the smaller, the rhesus monkeys, from coming to these public places, from coming out of the wooded area and making their nuisance felt. They're doing this, cutouts. So these monkeys get scared and are not coming close to this. And they're doing another thing. They're getting people who work for the municipality to go around these cutouts making monkey sounds. So it seems realistic. And the monkeys don't just say, hey, are you fucking crazy? I'm a monkey. I'm not going to fall for this shit. But they have people, human beings, making monkey sounds and to make the believability of the cutouts felt for the other monkeys. This is just crazy, right? I mean, I'm loving it while it's crazy. But if you had asked me, municipal head of the municipal department in Delhi or the municipality, whatever you want to call it, here's my thing. You're having human beings going around making monkey sounds to make the cutouts feel real. Now, I don't know if you've thought this through, but you've probably gone to stores. Maybe you've gone to Disneyland, or if you're in India, there was a store called Kids Camp, or you've gone to other places where you have human beings dressed up in suits like Donald Duck, Daffy Duck, or Mickey Mouse, or even Chewbacca, or even, God forbid, monkey suits. Now, my point is, if you have people who are willing to go to the level of making monkey sounds to prevent other monkeys to come and disrupt affairs at the G20 summit, yes, by having cutouts and sounds by humans to reinforce the believability. What happened to my face there? Why don't you just have these municipal workers dress up as monkeys? The believability factor is a lot more than a cutout with backup vocals or a voiceover or a narrative for cutouts. I mean, this is like those still image cards which you flash through and they create an animation. Instead, now we have real animation, right? We have people dressed up in real suits, like Planet of the Apes. Hey, did anyone watch that movie in the Delhi municipality? You want to scare monkeys, small monkeys? Have big monkeys. What is the bigger monkey and a more abundant monkey, let's not say bigger, than human beings? And Delhi, the capital, plenty of monkeys, plenty of potential monkeys. You don't have to dress them up. Some of them, yeah, you know what I mean? So here's my proposal. Have human beings either dress up or not dress up, since they have the ability to make monkey sounds, going around the G20. It will be effective. It will be cost effective. It'll be believable. And more importantly, if you're getting bored at one of these summits as a part of the diplomat team or as a part of the commission or part of whatever the teams that are coming, it's fucking hilarious. If you're working long days in these meetings and you're just going back to your hotel and suddenly you see people going around as monkeys, well, that will sell more these image of modern India, wouldn't it? Just putting that out there. Anyhow, before I speak more about monkeys and the summits, let me talk about today's guest, Dr. Jody Stanislaw. She is a person who helps people deal with type 1 diabetes. She lets them, she helps them with the various things that they can do to live a full life. And as a person who got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at a very young age, she has lived with it. And in a day where we are more and more learning the evils of sugar and we're being flooded by products which have sugar, how does one navigate this? Now, of course, for someone with type 1 diabetes, it isn't a choice, unlike type 2 diabetes, which is reversible or avoidable. So how does one make sense of this world, and how does someone live with so much temptation, and how does someone with type 1 diabetes live a full life? So that's the conversation with Dr. Jody on today's episode. Dr. Jody, if you're listening, I appreciate you joining me for this conversation, and all of you listening right now, thank you as always for tuning in and listening. And of course, if you do like the conversation, do share it with someone and to subscribe to not miss a single episode release every Friday. So till next episode, goodbye, God bless, take care of yourselves. Cheers. It's lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Jody.
Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to our interview.
Lovely. So, I just want to set this out there, right? I'm 40 years old now, and I understand the conversation around sugar, and I understand what it does to you. And it's, in many aspects of what it can really do long term to damage your body. But you transport me back to when I was 6 or 7 and say, hey, sugar's bad. And I'd just be like, you're being a mean parent, or you're being a mean adult who's trying to prevent me from having fun and enjoying life. But in your case, you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at that age, around 6 or 7, if I'm not mistaken. So what is the world we live in? Because right now I can, I have self-control, or I know the consequences of eating sugar. But how do you tell children that, refined products, which is all the good stuff, sugar, which is all the good stuff in their eyes, that none of it is good? Because, it's just hard to communicate that message to someone who's just surrounded by it and who's so tempted by it.
Excellent question. The parents do the shopping, though. Mm-hmm. And I think that parents need to empower themselves to at least take control of what's in the house.
Right.
And I've seen many parents say, I can't get my kids to stop eating sugar. And then I will ask them, well, who's buying the sugar? And what I'll find out is the parents themselves don't want to stop eating sugar.
Yeah.
I think we really need to have the home life be healthy, managing if at home there's a lot of sugar, then there's no hope for all the sugar they're going to be faced with outside of the home. So it really needs to, I want to talk to the parents and go through your kitchen and go through your pantry and ask, why is this here? Because it is more addictive than certain drugs. And unfortunately, it is so welcomed in a home. And that irony is killing people around the world.
Yeah, that's the very I think important point to acknowledge, right? Because I live with my parents and my wife and my 1-year-old daughter, and so we kind of obviously are looking at what we're giving her, right? She started on solids, and we obviously there's no sugar. They just introduced a little bit of salt now, but then you kind of now of course my parents are older. So when I was growing up, like it was a no-brainer that you wake up in the morning, have biscuits with your milk or whatever, right? Coffee or. And even I was talking to my wife, and she's like, I just find it so hard to wake up and avoid those 3-4 biscuits, not a packet or anything, but it's those cookies or biscuits, and it's just so part of us, right? Like I used to wake up. I remember my breakfast, or not breakfast, the first thing in the morning I would eat was like sandwiches with jam and butter, and jam is obviously just loaded with this sugar. And it's great fond memories, but now when I walk in the kitchen, I'm just looking at from the point of view of what my daughter should eat or not eat, and there are these snacks. There's so many snacks everywhere. There's chips or these various kinds of Indian snacks which are similar to kind of like pretzels and that kind of stuff, loaded with salt and processed in oil and deep fried. And that's one thing I don't do anymore. I don't snack, but I did as a kid. I would stuff in my face, right? I would just eat bags of chips, but the chips back then, just to give you context, were made in these local home stores, right? Like mom and pop shops. But now we're flooded with Lay's. We're flooded with these big brands that are pumping the market with whatever. I'm sure everything you get there, we get it here, like the cookies and the thing. So I don't have a question. I'm just giving you a sort of scenario of where we are. The thing is, even if you want to be like when sometimes I'm telling my mom, I'm like, no, don't give her any sugar, don't give her a biscuit. And they're like, you guys are just being paranoid. So it's hard sometimes to even make the house not even fortified, but a place where you can think, because a lot of people listening to this, or a lot of people in India or wherever, might not just be in their own situation to kind of control or to kind of organize what they want to eat or what they want to feed their kids, but they live in an environment which is beyond their control. So and of course, if you watch TV for 5 minutes, then you're constantly like, oh my God, if I don't have another McDonald's or another Carl's Jr. burger, I'm screwed, It just feels like a combination of things just out there to get you.
It is. They're all out there to get you, because the food industry is massive. And guess what? The drug industry is massive. And you don't think all those CEOs are friends, you're kidding yourself.
Right. Yeah, it's that club. They call it the networking club. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. I would say fortunate, if you will, to have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 7, because unfortunately, it probably does take a health crisis to force people in today's world to change their eating habits.
Right.
I have a very unique perspective on food because I've had to watch every single bit of food that I've put in my mouth since I was 7. Right. And if you don't have a health crisis, I assume you probably won't be motivated to change what you're eating, which is very unfortunate, because the problem with all of these products, I don't even call them food. Food is what God grows, right? Food is what comes from the earth. That is what we were meant to eat, is things that are recognized from the earth. Everything else is a product. It's not what comes from the earth, thus it's not generally what is meant for our bodies. Now, of course, there's there are certain products that are closer to earth and there's certain products that are not close to earth at all. So there's that whole I mean, I certainly don't eat every single thing that is from earth, but when I work with people, because I'm a doctor, and a holistic doctor at that, really helping people understand the importance of what's going on in their body. And a lot of people are having damage and negative consequences of a poor diet, that once I point out to them, fatigue, headaches, achiness, not good sleep, all those things, people don't realize that what they're eating is affecting everything. It's affecting how you feel every day. And it does affect everybody, because it's how you fuel your body. I don't remember what the question was. I'm kind of going off on a tangent.
No,
but...
it's it's absolutely fine. I sometimes wonder, because we, in many ways, India is mirroring what the US went through, or maybe what Europe went through in some ways, of course, with certain different directions. But what worries me is, when I lived in America, I kind of always noticed that, and this is, of course, also documented in studies, where all the junk, the fast food, the TV dinners are all propped up front in the grocery stores. And there's, of course, a marketing campaign behind that, or a strategy behind that. And all the healthy food and the stuff that you need to think about and kind of cook and put thought into is always tucked away in a safe and discreet corner, which only the healthy people and the ones who have the energy will find. But
right.
When you look at India now, it kind of is doing what the US did maybe 15, 20 years back, because there's a huge population there's a huge amount of disparity, of course, but now there's a huge population that is emerging into an economy which is able to buy and earn, and even a certain underprivileged population which was really poor is now a little less poor. And I'm, of course, not speaking as an economist, it's a general observation, right? But what's happening is that it's created this space for these industries and these people, these 10 CEOs, 100 CEOs who are all friends going, new market to exploit. And as a result, you see, many years back, there were people who were malnourished because of lack of food. But now you see that group of people who are malnourished now entering this ability to kind of buy their kids or their grandkids. But they're not many of them don't have an opportunity to understand that, I need to eat like the food that, as you said, grown in the soil, right? Like the millets or the whatever they eat. But they're tempted by this, by the Subways and the McDonald's, because that's what they're seeing with the smartphones, with online access to stuff. So it's creating the same, I would call it a pandemic on a much larger scale, because America is a country of 300 million, we're a country of 1.56 or 7 billion people. And that's scary for me, because I have two questions for you here. One is, what does the future look like with a direction that we're heading on? And second is, if we have to avoid this direction and tell people eat fresh vegetables and eat fresh produce, do we have the capacity to provide for such a large population?
I will address your first question.
Yeah.
And the second question, I don't know. I don't know about food science in terms of quantities, right?
Right.
But what it looks like is a very sick society. And that means we're not going to be able to run good businesses. We're not going to find good workers. We're going to spend lots of time in hospitals and feeling sick. And we're going to spend money on medical needs. It's terrifying. And the problem with poor food choices is that they don't show their damage until much later. It's a very slow decline, right? Just like classic with type 2 diabetes. You don't get type 2 diabetes overnight. You get type 2 diabetes as a result of years and years and years and years of misfeeding your body, mistreating and misfeeding. Same thing. And that is, in the TED talk that I gave a TED talk called Sugar is Not a Treat. I talk about how we give kids all the sugar and they start having focusing problems and depression and anxiety. And then, that can escalate into every aspect of your life. If you can't focus and if you have depression and if you have anxiety, then you're going to not be a good student, and then you're not going to be a good worker, and then you're not going to be a good parent, and then you're not going to be a good friend. And the level of poor dietary choices that the world is making is affecting every single aspect of society, relationships, businesses, education, because everybody is running the world, and everybody's eating a horrible diet. I mean, I
Right.
think one of the ways we could improve the world on every level is if every human being had a healthy breakfast. And that means no biscuits, no sweet, mochas and pastries and cereals, and like something wholesome, a whole grain oatmeal, bananas and peanut butter, apple and nuts, and scrambled eggs, or a protein, even a vegetable stir fry with spinach and
Mm.
eggs, something like that. I know. I'm trying to. I don't know exactly what people in India eat for breakfast, so I'm trying to
The interesting
make
thing
it.
with that, right, is you mentioned, of course, just to add in there, like, because I look at our Indian breakfast, right, and it's delicious, but a lot of it is rice based, right? But if you look at the actual, people might be like, oh, that's carbs. But the interesting thing is a lot of the stuff that like we have this thing called dosa, which is like a pancake, but it's made out of fermented rice, which is then ground. And a lot of the stuff like idlis, that's another kind of like a donut, not deep fried, but it's steamed. So a lot of the old stuff that we would eat is actually, it's not just processed rice, but it's fermented. A lot of the stuff is fermented. So that's apparently really good for people in the morning. If you look at even,
Better, much
I think
better.
much better. Yeah. So, but then again, if you look at what is fast selling in the restaurants, the breakfast restaurants, it's all the deep fried stuff because it tastes so good in the morning. And
Yeah.
what you said, yeah, there are of course, a lot of people who eat sausages, bacon, and eggs, but a lot of Indian breakfast is definitely more carby than protein or fat. I think fat, of course, we use a lot
And
of clarified butter, which I think is good. But yeah,
and
it
a
could.
high carb breakfast can spike the blood sugar and then put you on a roller coaster the whole day. You
Yeah.
get this rush of energy because you eat high carb, and then a couple hours later you might feel hungry or tired or frustrated or angry, right? Because your blood sugar is dropping, and then you grab some more sugar, and you can be on that kind of,
Yeah.
high low roller coaster all day long. And I actually feel bad for all of you that don't have a medical diagnosis to force you to eat better, because
Yeah.
most people don't make major changes unless they're so fed up with being fat, or they're so fed up with having headaches, or they're so fed up because they get diagnosed with, something. Or hopefully those of you that are listening are aware, though, of how much damage the the processed foods, the sugar foods, and the deep fried foods are. It's going to catch up with you. In America, by 2050, it is predicted that a third of our population is going to have type 2 diabetes. And type 2
Mm.
diabetics have anxiety, have depression, they might get their foot cut off, their kidneys might fail, they might have a heart attack, stroke, they might go blind, because high blood sugar, when there's too much sugar in the bloodstream, it's kind of like glass, little bits of glass circulating through the bloodstream, ripping apart the inside of your arteries, ruining your circulation all throughout your body. The number one reason why people with high blood sugar die is from a cardiovascular um, event.
Right.
And yet that is not something that happens like a car accident. That happens over years. And uh, I really hope that people, even if you can't make a big change, even a small change, right? Uh, it's, I don't know how to say it more clearly. Our diet is killing the world. It's
Yeah.
truly killing the world because of, like I said, the domino effect of the lack of energy that a sugary diet gives you in the long run, and the effect on your brain and your productivity and your creativity. And it, if it doesn't affect you now, it eventually will. We see that with
Right.
type 2 diabetics. It
And you,
eventually will catch
yeah.
up to you. If it hasn't, if your poor diet hasn't caught up to you yet, it will.
And I find that quite amazing that we kind of look at all the poisons out there, right? we say, oh, drugs and narcotics and alcohol. And of course, they all are bad, but, smoking's bad. But we do it as an informed choice. But we've never told food or look at food as an informed choice. But, well, it is an informed choice. Because if you tell me now, would you, and this is something I've been looking at closely over the past 18 months to 2 years, is I've been eating just 2 meals a day, if I do, sometimes 1 meal a day, right? And when I wake up sometimes at home, the smell of breakfast is delicious. I mean, we all have to accept that, right? Like, a donut with, a bagel with cream cheese when it's toasting. Oh, it smells delightful. But when I do eat that, it feels good. And I do eat it once. I eat breakfast maybe once or twice a week, maybe more some weeks. I'm quite flexible that way. But when I did go for about, almost a year without breakfast, and I started eating breakfast now, I realized what it was doing to me, right? Because I would feel, as you said, you would have like withdrawals after the sugar crash, or you would have that craving. And we all feel that craving is the body, screaming for food, because you hear people, right? Man, I haven't eaten in 3 hours. I'm starving. No, you're not. You're not starving. No. We're close to starving. But there's this thing now, as I was just to paint another picture about India, is like, there's so much. I mean, in some way, it seems like an abundance, right? Especially for the middle class and lower middle class and above, with restaurants, with these food apps, and just click of a button and these things saying there's in 15 minutes you can just get one pizza for like less than 50 cents, and people are like, wow. How do you?
They're all just trying to hook you to get your money. And then
people are hooked, right? People are hooked, and people. I mean, you look at in IT companies, when these are people who are educated, people who have good jobs, quote unquote good jobs, and it's just 3 meals a day, it's 4 meals a day, and it's not giving the body a break. And just to give you my perspective on this, is because I did a year of 18 to 21 hours fasting, right? I mean, intermittent fasting. And the way I felt, of course, my muscle mass dropped a bit, and I had to get back on protein to kind of improve that. But otherwise, like, I never, we've always told to measure our fasting, our sugar levels, right? That we have CGMs. But I never knew of this thing of fasting insulin, like reduce your overall insulin level. If that comes down, your body's able to fight better. And after a year of doing intermittent fasting for 18 to 21 hours, something which I could never reduce in my blood, which was my triglycerides, right? I'm sure you've heard of the triglyceride levels, which are bad for cardiovascular, or a determinant of cardiovascular health. Mine was 350 because of genetic reasons. Like, my family has a history of that. After 1 year of doing this intermittent fasting, my triglycerides dropped from 350 to 67, which was crazy, without medication. And I was like, if your body can fight back, and the biggest thing which I did was deprive it of overfeeding, I found that remarkable. So I wanted to understand, because you also, as a naturopath, are more preventive and holistic, as opposed to put someone on a pill and say, hey, see you in 40 years. So How do you approach this? Like, what do you look at a person who's just not thinking about what they're putting into their face? Sorry, that's I sometimes think like a feeding frenzy, right? Just like they just shovel food without even thinking what it's doing. How do you approach a person who's not even on the brink of, say, obese, or has hypertension, but someone who's just like, in their 30s, and they're like, have no symptoms yet, but could, but according to you, is heading down that slippery slope?
I'll have to find out what's important to them. Mm-hmm. I have to ask a lot of questions, and also dig deeper into any symptoms that they're, do you get headaches? Do you forget things? Can you stay focused? Do you sleep well? Do you have all the energy you want? Do you feel strong when you exercise? And then I'll say, well, tell me about your parents, and tell me about your goals. Can you visualize what you want to be doing when you're 50 and 60? Tell me about people that you know that are 50 and 60. How is their health? You have to really dig deep into what's truly affecting their life today, and maybe things that they're not aware of. Like I said, all those like energy and sleep and thinking patterns, focus, and then try to find out if I can't find anything that's important to them that they want in the future, and I can't find any symptomology that they're perhaps not aware of that I've uncovered, then they're not going to change.
Right.
So I really have to identify a dream, a desire, a goal that they have in the future. And then I have to connect it to if you want to reach that, the diet that you're presently on is probably not going to get you there, right? It does. It takes a lot of, and if someone's not motivated, they can't see any negative impact and any positive future, they won't change. So
Yeah.
But that's really the way. It's hard to change the diet, right? It's really hard. So just me saying, "Hey, sugar's bad," is not going to change anybody. I know that.
I know, and that's the strange part, right? Like by doing this, intentionally staying away from food, I started appreciating like how certain flavors are completely masked when you're just overeating because you're like, oh, this cheese doesn't taste good. But sometimes, I would notice after a 21-hour fast or whatever, even like a little, like I would have salad or something and without any kind of dressing. And I would feel like the vegetable itself had a little sweetness to it or a certain
Yes.
taste to it,
Yes.
And I want to understand that
Yes.
because we say fruits are great. Fruits, they eat like 10 fruits. And I don't know. So I sometimes find it just crazy how people are like fruits. And when someone says eat like, these superfoods, they're like, I'm eating 4 kilos of broccoli. I think we just had a little mad as a species. So sorry. That was my observation, not asking you a question on that. But first of all, can we live an entirely healthy life without any sugar in our diet?
Well, so let's define sugar. Added sugar is really what I'm talking about. Added
Right.
sugar, the sugar that food manufacturers add to products to increase flavor and extend shelf life.
Right.
Right. In the American diet, the top sources of sugar, added sugar, are soft drinks, fruit drinks, flavored yogurts, cereals, cookies, cakes, candy. So we're also talking spaghetti sauce, ketchup. It's also can be even literally in soups, cured meats, and bread.
Oh,
Sugar
okay.
is not a required nutrient in your diet. There's no such thing actually, even as essential carbohydrates. If you study nutrition, there's essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. And that means certain proteins, amino acids you must get from food, and certain fats you must get from food. But there's no such thing actually as essential carbohydrates. So added sugar is not ever needed in the diet. So now, so here from the American Heart Association, it actually, given the heart risks of a high sugar diet, because actually too much added sugar is one of the greatest threats to cardiovascular disease. There's a study, 15-year study, that people who got 17 to 21% of their calories from added sugar had almost a 40% higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease versus those who consumed 8% or less of their calories from added sugar. So added sugar is not only not necessary, but it's a huge health risk. And I actually have a whole list of other health risks I'll get to in a moment. However, so let me go back. The American Heart Association suggests that women consume no more than 100 calories a day, which is only 6 teaspoons or 24 grams of sugar, and men no more than 150 calories. And that is literally the amount in one soda.
That's crazy.
So in America, most Americans at least triple that. And
On a
so
daily basis?
on a daily basis.
So
Absolutely.
that's
So,
crazy. So it's like 3 Cokes a day or a
oh,
pack.
yes.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
okay.
Yes. So let's go into the health consequences. Consuming too much added sugar raises blood pressure, increases chronic inflammation. Obviously, both lead to heart disease.
Right.
Of course, it contributes to weight gain. Of course, we know that. And here is this list. So heart disease, weight gain, acne, type 2 diabetes, even some cancer. Sugar increases inflammation, right? Inflammation increases cancer, especially esophageal, small intestine, endometrial.
Right.
Obviously, a higher risk of depression because of blood sugar swings, creating neurotransmitter dysregulation. It can turn you into an addict. Of course, sugar releases these chemicals, opioids and dopamine, that activate the brain's pleasure center. So it doesn't take very long to acquire this tolerance, meaning you need more and more sugar to get the same hit. And that, of course, then is going to increase your risk of depression and cancer and type 2 diabetes. It may accelerate the looking old, skin aging, increases in what are called AGE AGEs, ironically, AGEs, age, advanced glycation end products. These are compounds that are formed by reactions between sugar and proteins.
Right.
And so sugar and proteins damage collagen, they damage elastin, and collagen and elastin are needed for that youthful look. Obviously, it drains energy, which we've already talked about, how you can feel this blood sugar spike, which eventually is followed by a drop.
Yeah.
It can increase the risk of fatty liver disease.
Mm.
So, unlike glucose, fructose is almost entirely broken down by the liver, right?
Yeah.
And high fructose corn syrup is in a lot of these processed products.
Yeah.
And this high fructose can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It obviously can increase the risk for dental cavities, accelerative cognitive decline, increased risk of Alzheimer's. High fructose corn syrup actually increases hunger levels. Increased fructose consumption may cause resistance to this hormone called leptin, which actually helps you feel full. So eating more sugar decreases your full signal, and then you want to eat more. So, in other words, sugar doesn't ever curb your hunger. It actually increases your hunger.
Right.
Research has consistently shown that people who drink sugary beverages weigh more than people who don't. So it just goes on and on and on and on.
It sounds
right?
like someone would be telling you the dangers of alcohol, right? It sounds exactly the same.
It's very similar, isn't it? Cellular aging, depression, obesity, absolutely. Draining your energy. It is. Sugar is, they say, more addictive than, I think, heroin, something like that, right? And you create a tolerance to it. So it's so subtle. It's sold to our kids. We feed it to our kids. We have it in our fridge.
Astonishing, right? That it's an institutionalized system where you know what I find?
They start them young.
They start them, and then they have the audacity to say you can't smoke or drink till you're 18. Like, you've made them drug addicts from the age of 6 months. Like, and now you're telling them. That's just insulting to them, right? Like, and I feel there's no chance for a kid now in today's day and age, because they're being assaulted from all sides, right? They have processed food, they have all the junk that they want, and it's cheap and it's easy to get. And then guess what? On top of that, you get them onto another addiction, which is their phones and social media, where, you know what, because of the food they're eating, they look like shit, and now you're making fun of them and they're getting addicted to those platforms. And it's just
and unfortunately, it's all driven by these companies that want to make more money.
And that's the strange part, right? Which I don't get is, you said they are, obviously in collusion to kind of, the healthcare is in touch with the fast food, in touch with this and that. But what I don't get is, of course, none of their kids are on it. Like, just like the people who created social networks, none of their kids are on smartphones, of course, because they know the dangers of it. But as you said, the future for a country or countries that are on this diet is just a sick population. But how will these people benefit from it? Because they need these workers. I mean, let's look at them as, I need a workforce, but they're creating a sick workforce. They're creating.
They're not looking. They're only looking in their pocketbook for the end of the month. This month, how much money did I make this month? They're not looking that long. They're not looking that long now. Yeah. I just need to grab some water. I'll be right. Just one moment.
So, I find that truly kind of hard to navigate, right? Because when you do something, and for you, as you said, you were faced with no other choice. I spoke to a friend the other day, and her son was, I think, 6 or 7. I think he was also diagnosed with type 1. And yes, it is, it's very hard. I can't even understand what it is growing up with that. But I grew up with a different kind of issue, which was a form of blindness called juvenile macular degeneration, right? And it's a form of thing. It's called Stargardt's disease. Basically, when I was 8 or 9, I lost my entire central vision overnight and left with a certain amount of peripheral vision. And I was just trying to understand, because yours is much more obvious when it comes to a thing to deal with, because it's food. It's what you put into your body. For me, it was one of the senses which I had to kind of cope with losing, or rather living without, for the most part. I'm just trying to understand, because there is a certain parallel that I can not see but sense in dealing with that? Because you just have to kind of, when you're put in that situation, you just had to navigate living a life with type 1 diabetes. In my case, I had to just face a life living with a lack of sight. So it's very important, because now I realize how good in some ways it was for me, because I wouldn't have gone down this path of living if I had that, Did you ever feel that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Those of us that have health conditions, we could start a whole spiritual discussion, but it can really
Absolutely.
be seen as a gift. It can really be seen as a gift. I don't think I would ever choose to have type 1 diabetes again, but I have no doubt, now that my blood sugar machine is beeping at me right now, I'm a little low. That's why I had to get the beverage too. It's just a little fruit.
Sure. Anytime you need anything, just
it,
we can
it
pause it. Yeah.
Anytime you have a health challenge, there's gifts that come out of it. And I have no doubt that eating healthfully and exercising and getting good sleep and not drinking much alcohol, those are things that are very significant in my life. Have healthy food is significant in my life. Getting good sleep is significant in my life, because I was diagnosed with a chronic condition at the age of 7. I know how important it is to take good care of my body. It's essential for me. It's an essential part of my life. And that is the gift of any health condition, is, ironically, right? It really does take you out of the norm. It makes that what everybody else is doing is not an option for you. In your case, it's seeing. In my case, it's eating, things that people unlike you and me do every day: eat and see things. They eat whatever they want. They see whatever they want.
Yeah. But that
And
comes
so
with a
you
lot
and
of
I have been
strength.
given a gift
Yeah.
of really having to go out of our way. Well, we've been given the gift to realize how precious the body is, to
Yeah.
not abuse it. We already lost one thing. We don't want to lose another thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's the gift that you and I have been given, that everybody that's listening, hopefully you don't have to be given a quote gift
Yeah.
to change your way of eating. But many people don't, until they do have some sort of scary diagnosis. And hopefully you and I are having this discussion to inspire people to not get to that point of heart attack,
Yeah.
diabetes, depression, anxiety, obesity, right?
Absolutely. I think what's important, what you just said, is looking at it as a gift, because for many years, I clearly didn't look at it as a gift. I looked at it as a curse. I looked at it as something that made me abnormal, not good enough. And what you're saying is essential, right? Because if you can change that mindset and look at it as an opportunity or a situation which you can use to appreciate the rest of what you have, as opposed to what you've lost, I think that important mindset shift is so essential to live a better life. Because if you look at it from what you've lost, like if you had looked at it like, oh my God, I can't eat all the things that I love, then you start doing this, which I did for years, which is start, kind of abusing your body, going, anyway, it's worthless. I'm just going to go on this spiral. But the reason I'm sitting here today talking to you is because I chose to shift that way of looking at myself, right? From not having to appreciating what I do have. And that the moment you go into that space, you start recognizing what you need to do. And of course, start balancing out, okay, I do appreciate having a few drinks with friends. I'll continue doing that, but I will reduce my intake of food, because I know that overeating is bad, or I'll exercise more. So you start making these choices to live the life that you want. And some days you'll be like, you know what, maybe it's time that I pull back from eating meat or quitting alcohol, because I just know that my body can't handle it anymore. So, but only can you look at life like that when you start appreciating what you do have. If you're kind of working from this, yeah, because otherwise you're kind of just like, anyway I'm screwed. Anyway, I can't see. Let me just get hammered every night or not eat food. Because I did that in college for years. I probably eat one meal a day, which would be, a bag of, top ramen noodles or whatever it was. And I would have severe acidity. I'm like, see, anyway, I can't see now, but I have bad gut health. And I wouldn't say it's because of, and I would never blame myself, right? I would be like, oh, anyway, I'm screwed. And I just didn't enjoy living for many years, because it was the only sort of escape was getting, drunk and kind of not looking forward to the next day. But if you shift to this place, I think that's the only way you can appreciate it, because there are many people who do have this gift, as you said, but are unable to see it as a gift because of that's the other messaging.
It's a process, right? Like the 5 stages of grief, right? The 5 stages of grief, the first is, denial, and then I think it's depression and anger. And the 5th stage is acceptance. And I certainly have gone, and they're not linear. You don't finish denial and then move on, and then go into anger and then finish that and then move on, right? So it's really interesting. I just yesterday had this discussion I just turned 50. You said you're 40, I turned 50. And sometimes it takes a lifetime of abusing your body to get to the level of appreciation. It either takes decades or a diagnosis. Truly.
That's a nice one.
It's either decades or a diagnosis, right? And so I was saying to my girlfriend yesterday, and I will be totally vulnerable. That's one of the things. I mean, I'm vulnerable with all my patients, and I'm vulnerable in my TEDx talk. I love being real. I'm not here to hide anything.
No, please. That's great. Yeah.
I passionately want people to eat healthier because it affects you on every level of your life, and it affects our world, right? It's one of my biggest passions, is that we've got to wake up and realize the damage that these foods these products are causing. But yesterday I said to my girlfriend, I said, I think for most of my life, I've been highly motivated by feeling like I'm not good enough, so I should go to med school, or I'm not good enough, so I should do a TED Talk. I'm not good enough, so I should travel the world, or whatever it is. Obviously, I'm a fun, outgoing person, but a lot of my undercurrent was, I don't know if I'm good enough, so I'm going to work really hard to make myself feel better about who I am, right?
Yeah.
And so then now that I'm finally 50, I'm like, you know what? I'm awesome. I just want to chill the heck
Isn't it
out
tiring to think like that?
What's that?
The way you were thinking, and I completely resonate with that. Isn't it just after a point tiring to just constantly? Yeah.
Tiring. Well, absolutely. I've never been so exhausted. Like, it's exhausting because you're living from not enough, as opposed to living from enough I want to enjoy. And my gift to myself now that I'm 50 is I am enough, and I want to relax and enjoy as much as possible. I've traveled the world. I spent 3 weeks in Bangalore doing a panchakarma and losing weight and feeling sick. And I've written a book. I've been all these things. And my business, by the way, is, I help patients with type 1 diabetes virtually. I've been doing that. I love helping patients with type 1 diabetes. So if anybody's listening and you know somebody that has type 1, look me up. That is my passion. I love helping people. But my passion now is, for my personal life, is to really relax more. But what I'm getting at is what she talked about when I said to her, I think I'm finally realizing I'm enough. And she goes, well, Jody, she goes, that's great that you figured that out. She goes, but don't think that you're the only one that doesn't think that way. She goes, that is every human's passion, every human's journey, I should say, that we all come here with our insecurities because we're human. We've forgotten that we are godlike, and it takes a lifetime sometimes to get back to really living in our brilliance, in our beauty, in our godlike qualities. And unfortunately, when we think we're not enough, or we think that we're not this beautiful, amazing human body, that's when it's so easy to fill it with crap.
Yeah.
Right? That's part of forgetting our godlike nature, our beauty, and what we're here. But it's also a process. You had to get to 40, you had to lose some vision. I had to get diabetes. I had to get to 50. So I don't want to judge anybody where they're at on the process, right? You can't plant a seed and see a beautiful tree the next day. There's processes and everything. So on one hand, I respect everybody's process of where they're at with their food and what they're at with their diet and where they're at with what they're putting in their body. But on the other hand, I hope that people get to a place of treating their bodies more godlike sooner than later.
The insecurity thing you mentioned is so important because it's also, you can use another word for it, which is the ego, right? But I feel, as you say so importantly, what you put in is so directly connected with what the body as a result does, because we already have enough junk in the world which is causing cancers and increase. We saw during COVID what happened, like people were susceptible to it, were really screwed by it. But when you look at food, and what you're saying is heartfelt, saying, I just want people to be healthy by avoiding sugar or processed food or stuff that is got added sugar. It's not an unreasonable passion to have, right? It's like, I want to help people. But the moment you say that, now it goes, in today's day and age, the conversation automatically becomes, what's wrong with my diet? My diet is better than yours. Like a vegetarian will point a finger at a carnivore diet, or a carnivore diet will point a finger at a vegan, or a vegan will point a finger at everyone, because the vegan is just the most wronged person on this planet, right? Because everyone is out to get them. And
vegans, unfortunately, some eat the most processed food I've ever seen. They eat cheese that's not really cheese. They eat meat that's not really meat. And I'm like, what is in that?
So exactly, I wanted to ask, because even in a vegetarian diet, like my family predominantly is vegetarian, right? So when we look at our food, it can be extremely unhealthy. If you look at only the sweets we make for the festivals, or because every diet's got bad food. If you only eat that, it's a bad diet, right? But if I look at growing up, mainly our carbs is rice, and it was what was made was eaten. Like we would have like 3-4 kinds of vegetable dishes, and it was yum. And at the end, we would eat a bowl of curd, which was made at home. So there was dairy, there was vegetables, there was carbs, but we never felt that it was overeating, right? But someone would then say, oh, but you're eating dairy and you need more eggs, you need more protein. So I want to understand, how do you determine this? Because as you said, someone might just sit on their high horse going, I'm vegan and I eat only tofu and silken tofu. Right. But I've read, besides you just saying now, I read that tofu is very processed, right? The whole... the way it's made isn't a natural soybean anymore.
Right.
So how does someone determine within their own ways, right? Because there may be someone who's, say, Italian descent or Italian, who's saying, but I've grown up my entire life eating pasta, or eating Parmesan with whatever it may be, or a Mexican diet, which is beans and tortillas, or my diet, which is our Indian diet, which is rice or wheat or chapatis or whatever it may be, right? So each person does have a certain diet which they grew up with. So how do you approach that and say, because there's not one diet for all?
Great question. So like I said first, I really want people to find their own motivation. Mm-hmm. You're not going to make change until you find your own motivation. And you're going to look older faster. You're going to have a heart attack sooner. You're going to gain weight and, look unhealthy. You're going to have acne, whatever, So first of all, find out what your motivation is. Maybe in the moment you can't concentrate. I just can't enforce that enough, because I don't want anyone to be listening to be thinking like, what's the point in this? Well, find your point first. Yeah. And then small baby steps. Maybe you do have a great healthy diet. Okay, celebrate and honor that. But if you're listening, the whole goal of you and I doing this interview is to inspire people to eat healthier so they feel better, they're happier, and they have a healthier body and a healthier life, right? They feel better about themselves, they feel better about their bodies, and they avoid pills and diagnoses in the future. Yeah. That's the whole point of our conversation.
Yeah.
And we could also say to not keep giving money to all these greedy food product corporations.
Yeah.
But you just got to find your weak point and just start there. You don't need to do an overhaul. Unless they're in a horrible medical condition, you need overhaul, right? The average person could probably eat better. I'll say in my TED Talk, Sugar is Not a Treat. At the end, I'll say, here are my 3 tips for you. Number 1, have protein for breakfast, right? Start your day by not spiking your blood sugar, right? Just start your day. If you haven't eating protein for breakfast right now, just eat protein for breakfast. Number 2.
So, okay, I'm just going to interrupt you there for a moment, because before you get to point 2 and 3. So someone would say to me, like, eat, like, what do you eat for lunch? Eat for breakfast. I have a steak or have eggs or whatever. But what are some good proteins for vegetarians? Because there's something I've been reading up on, and hearing a lot of debate on going, that vegetarian diets are really, really lacking protein. So you must have whey supplements or whatever it may be. So what would you recommend for a vegetarian listening to start with breakfast, especially? Because breakfast foods, if you don't look at meat, the options are fewer, let's say.
Okay. So number one would be buckwheat. It's actually not a wheat at all. It's actually related to rhubarb. So buckwheat is a great protein source, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one. Obviously, chickpeas, hummus, things like that.
Right.
Right. That would be a good one. I don't know how many nuts you guys do. But in America, we have a lot of like almond butters and cashews, Brazil nuts, everything like that.
Yeah.
You could just do edamame beans, right? And then you skip it being processed into tofu. Right. The pumpkin seeds, I love pumpkin seeds. Hemp is great. Beans and rice, right? Not too much rice, but beans, obviously I already mentioned that. Chia seeds, I love making chia pudding. Do you guys have chia seeds in India?
Yeah, I mean, see, that's the thing which you just said, right? Everything is available, but it comes at a price, right? So now someone who doesn't have too much money, their options automatically are dropped by 50% in the list you said. So the chickpeas are a very common thing in our diet. Beans, of course. Yeah. But again, I think buckwheat, we have different forms. We have millets, I think, and that's also quite a big part of
high protein.
Yeah, I think millets are good.
More high protein, yeah.
High fiber as well. So it's a bad. But but then again, you look at the people who can afford these things, they're already aware. But the people who can't afford these things are, first of all, not even keyed into the conversation, right? Because they don't even know it's an option. And that's what I find unfortunate, because that's the majority who are, of course, there are the people who will be like, oh, I've made my money, I'm prosperous now. And there's an old Indian saying, right, that it's the big belly is the prosperity curve. I'm like, no, it's not. It looks awful, right? And that is
you guys gotta make that outdated. I mean, that was like the Romans, right? You're fat means you're wealthy, but that was.
And it's so sad because outdated. A lot of Indians do that. Yeah, we do have very small physiques compared to a lot of people in the West, but we have big bellies, and that's something people are not. And I'm not saying just this is men or both men and women. It just looks, And apparently it is genetically predisposed for Indians to put on more abdominal fat because of a certain whatever, because of certain the fat receptors and the way it is compared to, say, a Caucasian body where it becomes bigger. Yeah. So, so anyway, so I digress. But that's a nice list if people can, first of all, access it and afford it. But you were then saying the second point, right? Protein in the breakfast menu.
Well, also is a lot of times when you are protein is going to start your day with balanced blood sugar, right? So it's going to avoid that high blood sugar spike right after breakfast that can last all day. And then you have energy and then you don't. And you want to eat more and you eat crap. And then you have energy and right? I mean, it's a whole thing. So it's not just replacing some sugar that you have in your breakfast with protein, but it's really potentially improving your whole day, right? I mean, I could say don't have dessert, but that's not going to improve your whole day, right? If you have protein for breakfast, you might not even want dessert by the end of the day because you haven't been on a blood sugar roller coaster all day, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a powerful way. But beans, I would say, would be the most worldwide, universal, affordable protein, right? Beans, whatever.
And sugar with coffee or sugar with tea, would you recommend that or just none of that?
Well, so I don't. Blanket recommendations are hard. If you just love, sugar, you're putting more sugar in. It's not great.
Yeah. Because it took me a long time to get off like milk and sugar in my coffee, right? I mean, I'm not a big coffee. I would do 1 cup a day or 2 cups a day, but it was just so ingrained in my head that milk and sugar, cream and sugar. But then first I was like, what is this drink that I'm having, which tastes, I'm like, that's the taste of coffee, buddy, because till now you were tasting sugar.
Isn't that funny? True. So true. People don't know I have a friend who was having all these dairy allergies and he said, I don't drink dairy, and then I had breakfast with him one day and he put so much cream. I said, look at all that cream. I'm like, what are you doing? His coffee is like a white milk. And he started drinking coffee and he's like, oh, this tastes really good. This is like a good taste. It's like you're right. So many people, they don't actually taste coffee. It's like it's like a medium for their cream and their sugar. And so if you are addicted to your sugar in your coffee, still start your day with protein, because
Yeah.
if the first thing in your stomach is sugar, it's horrible. I mean, don't have sugar in your coffee, drink that, and then have your protein for breakfast, because that doesn't really work. You already started your day with sugar. You have an empty stomach and you put sugar in it, boom, you're going to get a sugar spike.
So even
You
fruits?
start, yes. Yes. Now, certain fruits, there's the glycemic index, right? Blueberries, very low sugar. I always start my day with blueberries, maybe in yogurt or something like that, or chia pudding. And
Yeah.
but bananas, the worst. Pineapple, all the tropical fruits are super spiky in blood sugar wise. So that's not great. Yeah, I can just Google the glycemic index if
Yeah.
people want to learn about glycemic index measures how fast certain foods raise blood sugar.
Yeah.
So if you want to avoid a spike in the morning, the safest fruit would be, low glycemic fruits are like apples. And then when you put a protein on the apple, like in America, we do a peanut butter and apple, the peanut butter actually will slow down the glucose.
Right.
So that's why if you want coffee with sugar, have your protein breakfast first and then drink the sugar.
So it's lining the stomach. Right.
Yeah, exactly. My analogy is like, do you want to put the kids at the front of the line at Disneyland and the parents behind them? Or do you want to put the parents in front and then the kids behead? So
clearly we're putting our kids in front on all the fronts right now.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's nothing to slow down the sugar getting in, man. There's nothing. So
we're putting our kids on the front line.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. So point 2. Yeah, you were saying.
I have a whole bunch more tips besides the 3, but in my talk, number 1 is start your day with protein. Number 2 is next time you're hungry, first drink a big glass of water. So many people are dehydrated, and dehydration can feel like hunger and it can feel like fatigue, and people will want to eat food to have energy, but so many people are dehydrated. So next time you're hungry, always drink a glass of water first, and then see if you can suddenly skip your hunger. That is so easy, and it's so key, because I don't know about India, but I know people don't drink enough water. So that's number 2. And then number 3, I don't know how applicable this is in India, but in America, there's so many low carb replacements now. You can do pizza with cauliflower crust. You can do chocolate chip cookies with almond flour. You can do keto waffles and keto pancakes, and you can take all your favorite high sugar things and figure out ways to make them. I'm sure you can make things out of garbanzo bean flour or chickpea flour, right?
Aren't those all processed
Well, yes. And like I said at the very beginning, I'm not here to preach that every single thing you put in your mouth needs to be, a bean and a nut and only. The reality is all of us are going to eat food that are products. All of us are going to eat certain processed. Yeah. But like I said, there's the bread that's like whole grain, sprouted grain, really whole, close to the earth bread. And then there's like Wonder Bread that's white. And you're like, what is it? What is it? I don't even know what it is. I wonder what it is. Like, you don't even know what you're eating. Right. So it has that whole spectrum, if you will, of I have processed foods, sure, but I try to get processed foods that are closer to the earth form. And I'm not here to preach. I mean, in my TED Talk, I'm like, look, people, I love chocolate chip cookies. Are you kidding? I love ice cream. Are you kidding? I love, like, my favorite dessert, fudge brownie sundae. So I don't want to preach anybody like we have to be perfect. Yeah. But we need to have a healthier diet. I'm not saying you have to have a healthy every bite you take. But let's just let's raise the bar a little bit. Right. Let's just raise the bar a little. I'm going to always have cookies, but I love my almond flour cookies, and I put stevia in, like a plant-based sweetener instead of sugar when I make cookies. Yeah. So those are my 3 in my TED Talk. And then I actually have a few other ones. Don't buy it. I said that at the beginning. If you're having problems eating all these things, can you just not buy it? Can you just not have it in your house? Can you just throw out some of the crap that's in your house? Can you just clean it up a little bit, right? The next one is, one of the biggest killers is just sugary drinks. There are so many drinks, and they're all full of sugar. All of them. There are so many. So you want to make a change? How about just don't buy sugary drinks? That's it. That would be massive in terms of worldwide health improvement if we just stopped drinking sugar drinks. I mean, I don't know about in India. In America, the line goes on for practically the whole, like, it seems like it's a half a mile of 100 different options of sugar.
We're getting there. Right? We're getting there. That's what I used to do when I was in college. Like, have like Red Bull and and vodka, and I'm like, oh my god, this is sugar and alcohol, and it's just ridiculous.
Brutal. And caffeine.
And caffeine. But nowadays, I can't remember the last time I drank a Coke. I think it must have been over a year and a half, 2 years back. Because we of course now we don't have all the options of like root beer and Dr. Pepper, but we have a big number, and we have. Of course, another thing, people are like, oh no, don't drink Pepsi. You should drink Tropicana fruit juice. I'm like, oh my god, that's as bad, like these packaged juices. But
so much sugar.
And even alcohol, does it have as much sugar as these sugary drinks?
Well, we can't. Alcohol, are we talking about a margarita? Are we talking about tequila?
Or like just a beer?
Beer, we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, there's 100 million different kinds of beers these days. So,
but do they put a lot of added sugars, like typically like from these factory-made beers?
Unfortunately, in America, we have nutrition fact labels on all of our foods, but somehow the alcohol industry doesn't have to put any labels on them. So we don't know what they put in them. There's no label.
Right.
There's no label. But we know that beer isn't a health food.
Yeah.
We
right.
know that already.
Yeah.
Like if you're thinking anything except you enjoy the taste of it and you like the buzz, there's no like health benefits. It's not like giving you vitamins and nutrients and protein and amino acids.
Of course. Yeah. And I think that's important. And that's such a, I like the admission, right? People who drink, I like to drink. I know it's really bad, but you know what? I like the buzz. But no one does that with food, right? It's so it's almost like this.
Yeah.
I eat because I'm healthy. Like no one says because it's lovely to enjoy food, but it's either extreme. Either someone's like a total nut job going, I watch every single grain that enters my body, or it's the other extreme, shoving dominoes into their face. So I think what I really like about your message is that you don't have to be either or, but you can make a step from both directions towards the middle. Because even the extreme of every fiber of going into your body, it's not sustainable, right? Because after a point you just kind of become obsessed with just that, as opposed to enjoying eating and living.
Well, clearly your story, as you've dropped pieces here and there in our interview in the past hour, you used to eat horrifically, and now it sounds like you eat fabulously. So everybody, that didn't happen overnight. Right. Everybody's got to find what's important to them. Everybody's got to find their motivation. Everybody's got to take their baby steps. Right. Yeah. How do you start, a journey of 10,000 steps with one step? Right. That's how you do it. So I want to inspire people to find out how much better they think they could feel and start taking baby steps in that direction to like, I'm going to have protein for breakfast, or I'm going to stop drinking sugar drinks, or I'm going to not have that after dinner, or you don't have to do it. Overhauls don't last anyways. Overhauls don't last. Baby steps are right. Is the tortoise or the hare? The tortoise always wins the race, right? The hare burns out. So don't burn yourself out, but if you want to feel better, eat better. Just start there.
And the biggest thing I realized is that I used to battle the way I used to feel because of whatever bad diet, or I used to not have as you said, it was probably horrific. I think okay, cool to say that. But I would then balance that with like, because I was doing shows, I was like, oh God, I have to travel. So I would pop pills, I would pop antacids, I would be anxious. I would carry like my anxiety medicine. And I'm not saying I don't have those days now. There are days I wake up anxious because, probably had a few extra drinks, or, I had too much to eat, but that's the oddity now, where I can't remember the last time, of course, I'm saying taking every day of the week, waking up, taking an antacid, and people are like, oh, it's fine, you can take it. I don't take as strong a one. And I'm like, I don't take medicines at all now. I take supplements. Of course, I take vitamin D, I take vitamin K2, whatever. But I haven't popped a pill unless, of course, I'm hungover. Then I take a pill, like an Advil. Yeah. But medication is not something which is priority on my travel list or when I leave the house.
Great. And it's been a journey, and now you're there. So let's hope people get inspired to do the same. And
it's food.
Food is your life. Food is feeding your body, right? Food is making you look beautiful. Food is giving you energy. Food is helping with your memory. Food is helping you sleep. And I hope that our interview today has inspired people to realize that and be more mindful of what they're putting in their bodies.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering the sort of questions I had, and also some of the the directions that we went were really helpful because of scenarios that might not have panned out, but we can kind of prevent if people follow, as you said, small steps, right? Nothing overhaul, nothing kind of dramatic, but people, of course, can reach out to you, and especially if they know someone or they themselves have type 1 diabetes, and I can put all the links to your consultation service in the description.
Right.
Anything you would like to say before we wind up today, Dr. Jody?
Well, I hope you're inspired. And yes, you can find me by just simply Googling the words Dr. Jody Diabetes. I think those 3 words, I think they should work even in India. I think if you
absolutely,
I said my TED Talk, I really encourage you to watch my TED Talk. That's really going to hit home the message that we have today. And yes, if you or know someone has type 1 diabetes, I don't work with type 2s. I work with type 1s. You can find my website when you Google Dr. Jody Diabetes. And then I have free videos, I have a YouTube channel, and I have a calendar that people can sign up to speak with me. So I just hope that we inspired you to eat better, because it improves your life. And then when you're feeling better, it just ripples out and affects everybody. So our society today is really being burdened by this effect of sugar, and all the kids are eating it, and then all the adults are ended up in the hospital. And hopefully we can, get rid of that whole cycle of yeah. So thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Jody. It was lovely having you on, and thanks for the message, and thanks for all the work you're doing.